They brazenly lied to you. The worldview they painted for us since school crumbles to dust as soon as you pick up a calculator and a physics textbook. How could nomads who constantly move maintain furnaces weighing tons? How did a people living in the saddle organize the production of 1 million bricks that require years of continuous firing? Where did wild tribes acquire a unified metric system and technologies that Europe only mastered 500 years later? The main question is, what enormous empire has been hidden from us behind the term nomadic state, and why is it being so carefully concealed? In history textbooks, the Khazar Khaganate is referred to as a nomadic state, a union of tribes that moved through the steppes with their herds and yurts, hunters and pastoralists who occasionally raided their neighbors. A simple picture, understandable to every school student. But there is a problem. Archaeologists are uncovering brick factories and metallurgical workshops in the territory of this nomadic state. Fortresses made of fired red brick, furnaces for metal smelting, warehouses, workshops. This does not add up. Open any history reference book. Find there the definition of a nomadic society. Nomads are peoples who constantly move in search of pastures. They do not build cities. They do not construct stone fortifications. Their homes are easy to dismantle and relocate to a new place. Their entire life is governed by one principle: mobility. Now look at the list of so-called Khazar fortresses. Sarkel on the Don, Semikarakory on the Seversky Donets, the Right Bank Fortress on the river Oskol. Archaeologists have counted at least 12 major fortifications, and all of them are built from fired red brick. Imagine what it takes to produce such a brick. Stationary kilns, where the temperature must be maintained at 900 to 1,000 degrees. This is not a campfire that can be lit and extinguished. It is a complex engineering structure. Clay quarries from which the raw material is extracted. Warehouses for drying the blanks. Each batch must sit for at least 2 weeks before firing. A constant supply of fuel, tons of firewood or coal that need to be sourced and stored somewhere. Skilled craftsmen who understand the technology. Quality control, because even the slightest deviation in temperature or clay composition results in defects. How did nomads, who by definition are constantly on the move, organize industrial brick production? This is not just an inconvenient question. It's a direct contradiction. Nomads do not build factories. It is economically senseless for a people that moves from place to place every season. It is impossible to carry ovens weighing tons with you. It's not feasible to search for new clay deposits every few months. Brick production requires settlement, a permanent base, and infrastructure. The most obvious explanation is that they hired settled craftsmen. Perhaps they arranged with neighboring peoples who already possessed the technology. They paid for the work with silver or goods. This sounds reasonable. But then another question arises. Why don't archaeologists find traces of these craftsmen? Where are their settlements? Where are their burial sites? Where are the remains of their workshops outside the Khazar fortresses? And most importantly, in Sarkel, not just bricks have been found. Many of them bear stamps, imprints of the craftsmen who made this batch. Different handwritings, different signs, different symbols. This indicates a developed guild system. It shows that dozens of teams worked, each with its own master and its own markings. It's not about a one-time hiring of foreign builders for a single project. Let's take a closer look at the technology. Firing bricks in the 9th century is an incredibly complex process that requires precision. The temperature must be maintained evenly for 3 days. No more, no less. Overheating by even 50 degrees will cause the bricks to crack and become brittle. Undercooking them will result in crumbling and an inability to withstand weight. The defect rate was as high as 30%, even among experienced craftsmen. A kiln is not just a pit with a fire, it's an engineering structure. The chamber stands 3 to 4 meters high, with walls half a meter thick, built with ready-made refractory bricks. At the bottom is the firebox, where the flames burn. At the top is the chamber where the works in progress are placed. Between them is a ceramic grate that allows heat to pass through, but prevents the flames from directly touching the bricks. Loading the oven is an art. The bricks need to be arranged so that the heat passes evenly between them. If it's too tight, the lower rows will overheat, while the upper ones won't bake enough. If it's too loose, the temperature is lost. An experienced craftsman knows how to position the pieces with precision down to the centimeter. You need to stoke the fire continuously for 3 days. This means someone must be on duty at the stove around the clock. Day and night, someone has to add firewood. Keep an eye on the color of the smoke. If the smoke is black, the fire isn't burning well and needs more air. If it's white, the temperature is correct. If sparks are flying, it's overheating and the draft needs to be reduced. Firewood for such a stove needs to be special. Not any kind of wood provides the necessary heat. Oak or birch are the best options. They burn long and steady. Coniferous species are not suitable. They have too much resin and the temperature fluctuates. A single load of the stove requires up to 3 cubic meters of firewood. This amounts to 15 to 20 large trees. To produce 1 million bricks, one must clear a forest covering several hectares. To build a fortress the size of Sarkel, it was necessary to fire around 1 million bricks, taking losses into account. If one kiln can fire 5,000 bricks in one load, 200 loads are required. Each load takes 3 days, plus a day for cooling and unloading, making a total of 4 days. 200 loads amount to 800 days of continuous work, more than 2 years. And that's with just one kiln operating. To speed up the process, several kilns would need to be used simultaneously. 1 million quality bricks. Think about that number. This is not a craft job. This is not a random contract. This is an industry. Production streamlined. With planning, with material supplies, with trained personnel. And Sarkel is not the only fortress. Archaeologists have counted at least 12 large brick fortifications on the territory of the Khaganate. All of them were built around the same period. They all use the same technology, the same brick sizes, the same masonry techniques. It is as if a single construction corporation was working, erecting fortifications throughout the state according to a uniform standard. This is not a nomadic confederation of tribes. This is a settled industrial civilization with developed infrastructure, with cities, factories, and skilled workers. The term nomadic state simply does not apply here. It contradicts everything we observe on the ground. But if they had brick factories and fortresses, there must have been other industries as well. Metallurgy, for example. And it exists. Nomads do not smelt iron. This is an axiom. Metallurgy requires a stable base and complex equipment that cannot be transported. Yet archaeologists find thousands of metal artifacts in the Khazar layers: swords, chainmail, tools, jewelry, items made of iron, bronze, and silver. Each requires its own production technology. Look at the artifacts from the excavations of Sarkel that are kept in the Hermitage. Iron arrowheads with quenching mean that the metal was heated to a certain temperature and then rapidly cooled in water or oil. This process requires experience and precision. Bronze cauldrons with embossing. The ornament is embossed on the finished product using special tools. Silver buckles with filigree. The thinnest threads of metal, twisted and soldered to the base. Each of these technologies requires a separate workshop, distinct tools, masters who spent years in training. What is needed for iron production? Let's start with the basics. Mines. You need to know where the ore is located. You must have access to these deposits. Blast furnaces. The ovens where temperatures reach over 1,500 degrees. A constant supply of air through bellows or water wheels. Coal in large quantities. Charcoal, because coal was hardly used in those times. Forging furnaces for processing the obtained metal. Quenching baths. Tools. Molds for casting. A nomadic society cannot physically support such infrastructure. The furnace does not wander. It cannot be disassembled and transported hundreds of kilometers. The mine does not move with the tribe. Metallurgy requires a stationary base, and not just for 1 or 2 years, but for decades. Okay, let's assume they traded metal. They bought finished products from other peoples, Bulgars, Persians, Byzantines. That's a logical explanation. But then, where does the slag in the Khazar layers come from? The waste from metallurgical production that remains after smelting iron from ore. Slag is stone, useless ballast. It wouldn't be transported thousands of kilometers along with finished swords. Its presence only indicates one thing: metal was smelted on site. In the 1950s, during excavations at the Semikarakorsk settlement, archaeologists discovered remnants of smelting furnaces. Inside, they found slag, unprocessed ore, and charcoal. Radiocarbon analysis of organic material dated it to the 9th to 10th century. They smelted metal on site. They had their own metallurgy. But where did they get the ore? This is a crucial question. Iron ore is not found everywhere. Mines are needed. The nearest mines to the territory of the Khanate are in the Lipetsk region, the Tula region, and the area of Kryvyi Rih. From Sarkel to Lipetsk is 800 kilometers. Transporting ore over such a distance in the 9th century is practically impossible. Therefore, there must have been local deposits. Archaeologists are indeed finding traces of ancient mines on the Don. Shallow tunnels where brown iron ore was extracted. Primitive at first glance, but effective. The ore was broken out in chunks weighing 20 to 30 kilograms. It was lifted to the surface in baskets, crushed with hammers to the size of a fist. Only then was it transported to the furnaces. Working in a mine is incredibly hard labor. The tunnel is 10 to 15 meters deep. Inside, it's dark and the air is stuffy. Torches are needed, which means someone is constantly carrying oil or resin. Supports are necessary to prevent the ceiling from collapsing, so carpenters work alongside the miners. If water comes in, the mine will flood, and draining mechanisms are required. One team of 10 people could mine around a ton of ore in a day. To smelt a ton of iron, 3 tons of ore are needed. Thus, 3 days of work for the miners are required for a single smelting, and hundreds of smeltings are needed to supply at least one fortress with iron products: nails, clamps, hinges, grates, weapons. Let's calculate what was required to smelt 1 ton of iron in the early Middle Ages. 3 tons of ore, most of it goes to slag. 8 tons of charcoal. This first needs to be made from regular firewood, which is an additional 20 to 30 tons of wood. A minimum of 5 days of continuous furnace operation. A team of 10 to 15 people who constantly monitor the process, add charcoal, and control the temperature. Charcoal itself is a distinct industry. It is produced in charcoal pits. Logs are stacked in a cone shape and covered with earth, leaving an opening for the smoke to escape. They are then lit on fire. The wood smolders without access to oxygen for several days. The result is charcoal, lightweight, porous, and burns much hotter than regular firewood. But the output of coal is only 30% of the weight of wood. From 1 ton of firewood, you get 300 kilograms of coal, and you need 8 tons. This means you need to process 27 tons of firewood. That's more than 100 large trees. To produce 1 ton of iron, a forest area the size of a football field must be cleared. The smelting itself is an act that requires generations of experience. The furnace heats up to 1500 degrees. Inside, molten metal is formed. Iron, being heavier than slag, settles to the bottom. Once enough accumulates, the master drills a hole at the bottom of the furnace. The metal flows out into molds. This is a dangerous moment. Molten splashes can kill a person instantly. Skill, protection, and precision of movement are essential. But what comes out of the furnace is not pure iron. It's a bloom, a spongy mass of iron mixed with slag. It needs to be forged. Heated in the forge and hammered, squeezing out the impurities. 1 master and 2 assistants can forge a bloom weighing 15 to 20 kilograms in a day. A ton of iron equates to 50 blooms, 50 days of forging. This is no longer production. This is a manufactory. In the Penza Regional Museum of Local Lore, there are iron stirrups found in the territory of Mordovia. The dating is from the 9th to 10th centuries. The manufacturing technology is identical to that of the stirrups from Sarkel. The same composition of metal, the same forging techniques, the same shape. Was it made by a single craftsman, or one school, or perhaps one empire with unified production standards? Similar artifacts are found from the Dnieper to the Volga, from the Oka to the Caucasus. Everywhere there is one technology, one standard of quality, identical proportions of the products. This is not a random coincidence. It indicates a unified system of production and control. It points to a state that established requirements for products and ensured their compliance. The Khazar Khaganate is not a confederation of disparate tribes. It is a state with a centralized economy and uniform technological standards, with an industry that operated throughout the territory, with artisans who were trained in the same traditions. But industry is needed for something specific, either for war, the production of weapons and armor, or for trade, the manufacturing of goods for sale. or for both purposes at once. And this is where we come to the most interesting part. We are told that the Khazar Khaganate controlled the Volga trade route, the main artery between Europe and Asia, a route along which goods flowed from Scandinavia to Persia, from Byzantium to China. Silver, furs, slaves, spices, silk, all of these moved along the Volga. And the Khazars collected tolls from every ship. This is what official history claims. But how can nomads control a route that is 3,000 kilometers long? Open the map of Eastern Europe. Trace the course of the Volga from its source near Valdai to its mouth in the Caspian Sea. 3,000 kilometers of river. Dozens of tributaries. Hundreds of places to dock, unload, and bypass checkpoints. Now imagine you need to collect duties from every trading ship along this stretch. How would you organize it? The control of trade routes requires infrastructure. Customs posts every 100 to 150 kilometers. Any closer, and caravans will slip past the posts. Any further, and they'll be out of reach. Garrison troops of at least 20 to 30 men at each post. Any fewer, and you can't maintain order if merchants decide to force their way through. A communication system between posts. Couriers, signal lights to warn of intruders. A unified currency or system of tariffs. Otherwise, each post will charge whatever it wants. Document flow. Who has passed, what they are carrying, how much they have paid. Warehouses for temporary storage of goods. Protection against river pirates. Calculate. To control the Volga route, at least 50 customs posts are needed. That's 1,500 permanent staff just at the posts themselves, plus security, plus clerks who keep the records, plus couriers, plus repair workers who monitor the condition of the docks and warehouses. These are not nomads on the steppe. This is a state apparatus, a sprawling bureaucracy. Historians usually respond to this objection quite simply. They say that they collected tribute by force, conducted raids, and looted caravans. However, trade does not operate under conditions of constant raids. Merchants simply choose different routes. If a path is dangerous, they avoid it. They switch to land routes and look for alternatives. Yet the Volga route operated steadily for centuries. Adam Olearius, a German traveler, wrote about the Volga in the 1630s. I quote from memory the essence. It is one of the greatest and most important rivers in the world. He describes the trade that flows along the river, the cities on its banks, the docks, the warehouses, and all of this operates like clockwork. This means there was a system, predictable, safe, and organized. The trade caravan from Bulgar to Itil in the 9th century took 25 to 30 days. This was assuming good weather and no issues. The caravan needed to stop every 30 to 40 kilometers. People couldn't row with paddles day and night. Horses needed rest and feed. Goods had to be checked, rearranged, and repackaged. This meant a chain of stopping points, with inns where one could spend the night, with warehouses where part of the goods could be temporarily unloaded, with forges for repairs, with dry docks for fixing the vessels. Byzantine sources mention that in Itil there was a port capable of accommodating up to 200 ships at the same time. 200 ships. Imagine the scale. Each vessel in the 9th century measured 15 to 20 meters in length and 3 to 4 meters in width. The crew consisted of 10 to 30 people, and the cargo capacity was up to 5 tons. To accommodate 200 such ships, a water area of at least 20,000 square meters is needed. This is not just a shore where boats dock. It is a planned system. The docks must be equipped with decking, wooden platforms on piles to be independent of water levels. The piles need to be driven deep into the bottom, at least 3 to 4 meters, otherwise the spring flood will uproot them. Each dock requires several hundred logs, and there should be dozens of docks, cranes or lever systems for unloading. Barrels of honey weigh up to 300 kilograms. Bales of fur weigh 1 to 150 kilograms. Such loads cannot be carried by hand. Mechanisms are needed. The simplest crane is a post with a lever and counterweight. However, for it to operate reliably, metal fastenings, ropes, and pulleys are required. All of this needs to be manufactured and installed. Customs warehouses. Goods arrive. They need to be stored somewhere while inspection and assessment are underway. The warehouse must be dry. Furs rot from moisture. Secure. Silver gets stolen. Spacious. Large caravans arrive. So it should be stone or brick buildings with a roof, with guards at the entrance, with ledgers that record every bale, scales for weighing silver, not market scales that weigh several kilograms, commercial scales capable of measuring a centner with an accuracy of a few grams. Such scales are made of bronze. The beam must be perfectly balanced. The weights are calibrated and certified with a seal. The slightest error in the scales means that the merchant loses money and the state receives less in duties. Assayers. Silver can vary in purity. Pure silver is more expensive. With impurities, it's cheaper. Specialists are needed to determine the quality of the metal. In the 9th century, they used a test stone for this purpose, a black slate on which silver leaves a mark. By the color and brightness of the mark, an experienced master could determine the purity with an accuracy of up to 5%. And Etel is not the only port of such caliber. Similar descriptions exist for Bulgar, for Sarkel, and for other cities along the Volga. A unified system of ports. A single standard of service. Everything operates like a well-oiled machine. The Volga route is not just a river along which boats sail. It is an infrastructural highway with ports, warehouses, garrisons, and customs. The Khazars did not control this route. They built it. They created a system that transformed the Volga into the main trade artery of Eurasia. But for such a system, a currency is needed, a single one, recognized by all participants in trade. You can't collect duties in furs or bags of grain. Money is needed. And it existed. In museums, there are thousands of silver coins found on the territory of the Khaganate. They are called Kufic dirhams. They bear Arabic calligraphy, intricate inscriptions that an average person cannot read. Historians have long referred to them as Persian silver, suggesting that these were coins from Persia or the Arab Caliphate that the Khazars simply traded. A convenient explanation. But there is a nuance. On some coins, the inscription is not in Persian at all. It reads, Ardakshir Khazar, who minted money in the name of the Khazars. Open the catalog of the State Historical Museum, the section on numismatics from the 9th to 10th centuries. There are hundreds of coins with the same inscription, Moses, Messenger of God. They have been found in various locations. On the island of Gotland in Scandinavia, in the Volga region, on the Don River, in the Caspian region. Everywhere, the the same coins with the same inscription. What is needed for coin minting? Let's start with the material. Silver mines, or a constant influx of metal through trade. The mint is a secure facility where stocks of silver and finished coins are stored. Dies are metal stamps used to imprint images onto the blanks. They are made by highly skilled engravers, with each die being a work of art. Weight and purity control. Each coin must weigh a strictly defined amount and contain a precisely determined percentage of pure silver. Any discrepancy signifies counterfeiting, and the punishment for counterfeiting is execution. Protection against counterfeiters. A state monopoly on the production of money. Nomads do not mint coins. For this, a permanent capital is needed. A treasury where reserves are stored. Mint workers who spend decades refining their craft. Inspectors who check every batch. At first glance, it seems that the Kufic dirhams are merely copies of Arabic coins. Merchants imitated them, making similar coins for the sake of convenience in exchange. But then why do they bear the inscriptions Ardashir the Eternal and Moses, Messenger of God? This is not imitation. It is a declaration of sovereignty. It is a statement. We mint our own money, and they circulate alongside the Persian coins. On the island of Gotland, a treasure was found in 1844. Among hundreds of coins, there was one special coin. On one side, Ardashir Khazar. On the other, Moses, Messenger of God. Experts determined the minting location, the Volga region. The silver content was 85%. This is a high quality. It is not an Arab coin that accidentally ended up in Khazar lands. It is a Khazar coin minted by the Khazar Mint, according to Khazar standards. And this is not an isolated find. Hoards with such coins are discovered throughout Northern Europe. In Sweden, archaeologists have counted over 300 locations where Kufic dirhams have been found. In Norway, there are dozens of hoards. In Finland, Denmark, and even in England. In total, more than 80,000 silver coins with Arabic script have been found in the territory of Scandinavia. 80,000. These are not random losses of travelers. They are traces of extensive trade. The Vikings referred to the eastern route as Ostveg, the Eastern Road. They traveled down the rivers from the Baltic to the Volga. There they traded with the peoples of the Khaganate. Furs, slaves, and amber were exchanged for silver. And this silver was Khazar, minted in Itil or Bulgar. Look at the geography of the finds. Coins inscribed with Moses, Messenger of God, have been discovered from Stockholm to Bukhara, from Kiev to Kazan. This spans several million square kilometers. A unified currency across such a vast area signifies a unified economic system, not separate tribes trading with one another, but an integrated market with common rules. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitos writes about the Khazars in the 10th century. He notes that all trade routes from the north pass through their territory. Russian merchants bring goods to Constantinople, but they first travel through the lands of the Khaganate. They pay duties and obtain permission. Without the Khazars' consent, trade is impossible. Striking a coin in the 9th century is a complex process. The silver blank is heated to 600 degrees. It is placed between two dies and struck with a hammer weighing 5 to 7 kilograms. Precision is crucial, otherwise the image smudges. The weight of the coin must be exact, within plus or minus 0.2 of a gram. If it is more or less, it is deemed a reject. A maximum of 5,000 coins can be struck from one die before it wears down or cracks. In the treasures, they find tens of thousands of coins. This means there were dozens of dies. Therefore, dozens of craftsmen were at work. This is mass production. This is a state minting system. The Penza Regional Museum houses silver coins found in Mordovia. They date back to the 9th century. The minting technology is identical to that of the so-called Khazar dirhams. The same silver content, the same weight standards, and the same methods of engraving images. Such coins are found from Scandinavia to Persia, from the Dnieper to the Oka, a single monetary standard across millions of square kilometers. A merchant from Bulgaria could arrive in Kiev and pay with the same coins. A merchant from Scandinavia could buy goods in Itil with those same dirhams. This is not just trade. This is a unified currency zone, a single economic system. Kufa dirhams are not Persian silver that happen to be traded on the Volga. They are the currency of an empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Caspian, from the Dnieper to the Urals. And this empire had a capital, a city mentioned in all sources, Itil. Archaeologists have been searching for this city for 100 years. They are digging the delta of the Volga River. They find shards, animal bones, and charcoal from campfires, small household items. But they do not find the city itself. There are no mighty walls, no foundations of palaces, no traces of the grand capital that the sources describe. A ghost city. Everyone writes about it, but no one can show where it once was. What if he is standing in the same place, under a different name? Open the map of the Lower Volga. Find Astrakhan. It is the city in the delta of the river, where the Volga flows into the Caspian Sea. Now read the description of Itil in the letter of the Khazar Kagan Joseph, dated to the 10th century. Quote, I live by a river named Itil, at the mouth of the river. Coincidence? Archaeologists claim that Itil has been submerged or eroded by the waters of the Caspian Sea. The sea's level changes, the shores are eroded, and the ancient city has gone underwater. A logical explanation. But there is a problem. The Caspian Sea has changed its level several times over the last 1,000 years. In the 13th century, there was a transgression, and the sea rose by 3 meters. In the 15th century, there was a regression, and it fell by 5 meters. In the 18th century, it rose again. If the city was on the shore in the 10th century, it should have been submerged and then revealed again. But no ruins have been found during any regression. A city the size of Itil does not disappear without a trace. According to contemporary accounts, tens of thousands of people lived there. There were stone buildings, palaces, mosques, synagogues, and churches. A port for 200 ships, markets, warehouses. Even if it were submerged, the foundations should have remained. Piles, stones from the pavements. When the sea recedes, all of this should have surfaced. Skeptics will argue, Astrakhan was founded in the 13th century as the capital of the Golden Horde, or in the 14th, or in the 15th. Sources differ. But Itil existed in the 9th to 10th centuries. That's several centuries apart. But how do we know when Astrakhan was founded? From chronicles. And who wrote them? When? Under what circumstances? Let's take a look at the very name. Kagan is the Khan of Khans, the supreme ruler, a title with the prefix Ka. Astrakhan. Let's break it down. Aztarkan, or even Aztarkan. In some Russian chronicles from the 16th century, there is a spelling of Kaz-Tarokan. Kaz-Tarokan. Remove one letter, change the pronunciation. Khazar-Tarokan? Or the capital of the Khazars. Toponyms change slowly. Cities retain their names for centuries, even as rulers and languages change.
Moscow is practically called the same in the 12th century. Kiev has remained Kiev. Novgorod is still Novgorod. But Astrakhan transformed from Itil to Astrakhan in 300 years? That's too radical a change, unless there was an intentional renaming. Adam Olearius in the 1630s writes about Astrakhan. He notes that ancient fortifications have been preserved in the city. The quote is roughly as follows: "They are much more powerful than necessary for a city of this size. The fortifications were built for a much larger population, for the capital of an empire, not a provincial trading post." In the 19th century, archaeologists indeed found oddities in Astrakhan. During the construction of a new port in the 1870s, workers stumbled upon foundations, massive brickwork at a depth of 3 to 4 meters. The thickness of the walls is 2.5 meters. This is not a house. It is a fortress wall, or the foundation of a very large building. Bricks from this masonry were brought to the surface. They bore stamps, marks of the masters. Experts compared them with the stamps from Sarkel. A match. The same symbols, the same application technique. Dating 9th to 10th century. But Astrakhan was officially founded in the 13th century. Where did 9th century bricks come from in it? The answer of official archaeology is that there are remains of an earlier settlement at this site. Before Astrakhan, there was another city here. Then it was destroyed. After that, a new one was built in its place. Logical. But then, what was the name of the old city? Silence. There is no name, no mentions. It is as if it never existed at all. What if the old city is actually Itil? Perhaps after its conquest it was renamed. A new name was given. A new history was written. They said the city was founded recently, and all those ancient foundations are just remnants of some forgotten settlement. In the archives of the Astrakhan Regional Museum, reports from early 20th century excavations are kept. They describe finds of coins with Arabic inscriptions, ceramics with patterns typical of Central Asia, and jewelry in the Eastern style. All of these are dated to the 9th to 11th centuries. However, these finds are not displayed in the exhibition. They remain in storage, too inconvenient for the official narrative. If Astrakhan is Itil, then much falls into place. The geography matches, the mouth of the Volga, the delta of the river. The size matches. The remnants of fortifications speak of a large city. The artifacts match, the same bricks, the same coins. Only the name remains, and it also matches if one removes later distortions. In the 17th century, cities all across Russia were being renamed. Some names disappeared, while new ones emerged. Kazan remained Kazan, but the spelling in documents changed. Simbirsk took the place of the old name Sinbir. Saratov, but what was it called before? We do not know. The memory has been erased. The documents have not survived, or they were not wished to be preserved. Itil did not disappear underwater. It was renamed. Astrakhan
is Itil, the capital of what historians call the Khazar Khaganate. The city is located in the same place, only the name has changed. But what is actually known about this state? Who lived there? Which peoples were part of the Khanate? In the letter of the Khazar Khagan Joseph, dated to the 10th century, the nations that comprise the Khanate are listed: Burtaz, Bulgars, Erzia, Mari, Arisu. In total, 25 nations. The Khagan had 25 wives, one from each nation. Political marriages binding the alliance. The question is simple: where are these nations now? Open the ethnographic map of Russia. Find the Erzias. They are currently a subethnos of Mordvins in the Penza region, a small group that has preserved its name. Now, look for the Cheremis. They are the modern Mari.
The name has changed, but the people remain.
And now, try to find the Burtas. They are not there. There is no such nation on the map. It has vanished. A people does not disappear in just one generation. Assimilation is a process stretched over centuries. Languages change gradually. Customs blend. But the self-name, the name of the people, endures for a long time. Even after conquests, after changes in rulers, people remember who they are. Russians did not become Tatars after the Mongol yoke. Poles did not become Germans after the partitions. But the Burtas, they are simply gone. It's as if they were completely erased. 25 peoples in the 10th century. At least 10 to 15 of them disappear without a trace by the 16th century. Let's look closer. The Burtas, mentioned in the letter of the Khan Joseph as one of the main peoples. They live between the Volga and Oka rivers. They engage in trade and crafts. In Arab sources from the 10th century, they are described as a wealthy people with much silver and furs. In the 13th century, mentions become rarer. By the 14th, they disappear completely. Where did they go? Saviors, a Turkic people who controlled part of the North Caucasus. Byzantine chronicles from the 6th to 7th centuries often mention them. Strong warriors, skilled riders. In the 9th century, they become part of the Khaganate. In the 11th century, they are mentioned for the last time. After that, silence. A people that existed for 500 years disappears without a trace. Barsalis, another Turkic people from the Khaganate. They lived in the lower Volga region. They engaged in cattle breeding and trade. The Arab geographer Ibn Hordadbeh mentions them as important trading partners in the 9th century. The Armenian historian Movses Khorenatsi writes about the Barsalis in the 7th century. After that, their traces disappear, as if the people never existed. This is not natural assimilation. A people can adopt the language of their neighbors. They can accept a new religion. They can mix with other tribes through marriage. But their self-designation is preserved. Armenians have lived among dozens of other nations for 2,000 years. They remain Armenians. Jews are scattered all over the world. They remember who they are. Even the small northern peoples, of which only a few thousand remain, have preserved their names. And the Burtas, Savirs, and Barsils have completely vanished. There are no descendants left, no names, no legends, as if they were entirely erased, and the survivors were scattered in such a way that they forgot their origins. It is officially asserted that they dissolved into other peoples after the collapse of the Khanate. They mixed through marriages, adopted the language of their neighbors. Fine. But if this is assimilation, where is the transitional period? Where are the bilingual settlements? Where are the mixed burials? Where are even the mentions in the folklore of neighboring peoples about how the Burtas became part of the Mordvins or the Bulgars? There is no trace, no memory. In the letter from the Kagan, the Urzians are mentioned as one of the main peoples living along the Itil River. They controlled significant territories and had their own cities. In the Russian chronicles of the 16th century, the Urzians are rarely mentioned. Instead, the term Mordva appears. This Latinized name was never used by the Urzians themselves. It is a name given from the outside. On the map of 1614, created by Gerard Mercator, the territory between the Don, Oka, and Volga rivers is labeled as Mordia, Mordua in Latin. However, in earlier sources, from the 14th to 15th centuries, this place is referred to differently, or not named at all. The term Mordia appears abruptly. It is linked to a Latin root and made official. The old names are erased. Khazars. In Arabic sources, from the 9th to the 10th centuries, Khazar. In Russian chronicles from the 16th century, the word Cossacks appears. In the 17th century, Kazaki. The difference is one letter. Stepan Razin calls himself a Don Cossack. He is based in Astrakhan. He goes to war against Moscow in 1670. And everywhere his army arrives, Samara, Saratov, Penza, Saransk, the gates open for him, as for one of their own. Coincidence? Of the 25 peoples of the Khaganate, today we can clearly identify only 8 to 10. The others have vanished. But a people is not a mist that dissipates. It is made up of individuals, lands, languages, burial sites, traditions. All of this cannot simply be erased without a trace. 25 nations did not vanish on their own. They were renamed, intermixed with each other. Their self-designations were erased. The Khazars were transformed into nomads who allegedly dissolved into history. Their subjects were divided into Finno-Ugric and Turkic groups. The unified empire was cut into ethnographic patches, each with its own new history. But when did this happen? In which century was the memory of the Khanate erased? The official history gives a clear answer. The Khazar Khaganate was defeated by Prince Sviatoslav in the year 965. Kievan Rus struck at the capital, captured fortresses, and dispersed the army. The Khaganate fell apart. The end of the story. But archaeology reveals peculiarities. Fortresses made of red-fired bricks date back to the 9th century. The Khazars supposedly built with red bricks at that time. And now look at Rus. Red-fired brick began to appear in Russia in large quantities only in the 15th century. Before that, they used plinthos, a wide, flat brick of Byzantine type. Or they built with wood and stone altogether. Look at the Moscow Kremlin. Red bricks. Construction took place from 1485 to 1495. St. Basil's Cathedral, mid-16th century, red bricks. This is late medieval technology. How did the nomadic Khazars mass-produce red bricks in the 9th century when even the capital of Rus mastered it only 600 years later. The technology for firing red bricks is more complex than it seems. New type of kilns are needed, not vertical, but horizontal. A uniform temperature of 900 to 1,000 degrees is required throughout the volume. Control over the composition of the clay is essential. It is the iron impurities that give the red color. Quality fuel is necessary. Until the 15th century, this technology did not exist in Russia. If the Khazar forts were built from red brick using the same technology as the Moscow Kremlin, they cannot be dated to the 9th century. That technology emerged later. 600 years later, to be exact. Historians will object. Dating methods are infallible. Radiocarbon analysis suggests the 9th to 10th centuries. But what exactly is being dated? Organic material, wood, coal, bones. Brick cannot be dated using the radiocarbon method. It is dated by the layer in which it is found. And the layer is dated based on the organic material from that same layer. In the 1950s, during excavations at Sarkel, archaeologists discovered wooden piles of the foundation. Radiocarbon analysis indicated the 9th century. Based on this, the entire fortress was dated. However, the piles are the foundation. The foundation could have been laid in the 9th century. The brick masonry on top of these piles was added later, 500 to 600 years afterward. This is referred to in archaeology as redeposition. Stratigraphy is the science of layers of the earth. If items from the 9th century are found in a layer dating to the 9th century, it is logical to assume that everything in that layer is from the 9th century as well. However, later renovations disrupt the layers. People come to the ruins of an ancient city, build on top of the old foundation, dig pits, and mix artifacts. Archaeologists are aware of this problem, yet the official dating remains unchanged. Now let's look at other events. The year 1649. The Sobranoye Ulezhenia is adopted in Russia, a new codification of laws that abolishes many old norms. The 1650s. The church reform of Patriarch Nikon begins. Rites, books, and icons are changing. The years 1666 to 67. The church schism occurs. Part of the population refuses to accept the new rules. The years 1670 to 71. The uprising of Stepan Razin takes place. He marches from Astrakhan to Penza, Saratov, and Saransk. The mid-17th century is a time of uprisings across the country. Pskov is rebelling. Novgorod is in revolt. The Solovetsky monastery refuses to accept the reform. The Solovetsky sitting begins. The copper uprising in Moscow. The Salt riot. Like a wave of resistance sweeping across the land, as if people are resisting the final act of some grand operation. The Khazar Khaganate was not destroyed in the 10th century. It was annihilated in the mid-17th, along with all who remembered the old faith, the old laws, the old state. And then they wrote a new history. In this history, the Khaganate vanished 700 years ago, far away, safely. No one living remembers. No one can object. But to conceal such an operation, it's not enough to rewrite the books. You need to erase the material evidence, artifacts, things that could reveal the truth. But some remain, and they are kept in the most prominent place. In the armory chamber of the Moscow Kremlin, the cap of Monomach is on display. The official version is that it was a gift from the Byzantine emperor to a Russian prince, a symbol of the continuity of power from Rome to Moscow. A beautiful legend. But if you take a closer look at the cap itself, strange details become apparent. Remove the top part. There is a cross, pearls, and gold plates. This superstructure was clearly made later. A different style of work, different tools.
This is evident even in the photographs. The lower part remains. A headdress of Eastern type, not Byzantine. It is covered with filigree, the finest gold threads twisted into patterns and soldered to the base. Compare with the artifacts of the Penza Regional Museum. There, a cockade found in Mordovia is kept. Dating, 9th to 10th century. The same filigree technique, the same patterns, the same gold purity, work of the same level, possibly from the same workshop. Filigree is a jewelry technique of the highest complexity. Gold threads, 3 to 5/10 of a millimeter thick, are twisted into bundles. These bundles are then arranged to create a pattern. Each element is soldered to the base. The slightest mistake can skew the design. In the 9th and 10th centuries, only a few masters were knowledgeable in this technique. Each had their own signature style, much like an artist. Two artifacts found 1,000 kilometers apart cannot have identical craftsmanship unless they were produced by the same school, or one region, or one empire with unified standards. Many will quickly decide that these are different items from different eras. The imperial crown from the capital, and an ordinary find from a provincial museum. But metalworking experts who have compared the samples note their identity. Not similarity, precisely the identity of the techniques. The same angle of twisting the threads, the same soldering technique, the same composition of the solder. The only difference lies in the sizes of the products. In the description of the armory chamber from the 17th century, the Monomach's cap is referred to differently, not as Byzantine. It is mentioned as the Kazan cap. Kazan is the capital of the Khanate of Kazan. The Khanate was destroyed by Ivan the Terrible in 1552. The city was taken by storm. The treasures were plundered. The cap is a trophy, a military loot. The upper part of the Monomach's cap, adorned with a cross and pearls, is crafted in the Moscow style of the 16th century, as established by experts. The lower part, featuring golden filigree, reflects the style of the 9th to 10th centuries. Two different artisans, two different eras. The old Eastern cap was modernized. Christian symbols were added to make it suitable for an Orthodox czar. In the armory chamber, there are two more hats, the Kazan and the Astrakhan. Both were taken as trophies during the conquest of the respective khanates. Both are made using the same technique, the same filigree, the same patterns. All three hats come from the Volga region, from one region. These are not three different artifacts from three different peoples. They are the regalia of one dynasty, the dynasty of Khans, rulers of the empire that controlled the Volga. They were taken as trophies after the conquest, renamed. New origin stories were created. The cap of Monomach is not a gift from Byzantium. It is the crown of a Khazar Khagan, captured by Moscow's troops during the conquest of one of the cities. It was remodeled, with a cross added, and labeled as Byzantine.
However, the metal and craftsmanship reveal its true origins. If the artifacts of the Khazar Khaganate are in the Kremlin, it means the Khaganate was destroyed recently. So recently that the trophies have not yet turned to dust. Gold does not rust. After 1,000 years, it looks just as it did on the day it was made. But if the hat were really 1,000 years old, it wouldn't be worn by emperors. Too ancient, too fragile. How to conceal the destruction of an entire empire? How to erase the memory of a state that existed over millions of square kilometers? To conceal such an operation, 3 things must be eliminated: written sources, material traces, the memory of people themselves. First, burn archives and libraries. Second, bury or melt down artifacts. Third, write a new history and make everyone believe in it. Open your history textbook. Find the chapter about the Khazar Khaganate. How many pages does it have? 2? 3 paragraphs? Now find the chapter about Kievan Rus. There are 20 pages, 30, detailed maps, lists of princes, descriptions of battles. Why is a state that controlled the Volga route, the main trade artery of Eurasia, described in just 3 paragraphs? Why is there almost nothing known about it? The operation to erase memory proceeded in several stages. Step 1. To destroy the chronicles of the Khaganate itself. When Astrakhan, Kazan, and Bulgar were captured, the first thing to be burned were the libraries. All the books, all the documents, all the archives. Fire leaves no traces. After a fire, it is impossible to prove what was in the books. Step 2. Rename the territories. Khazaria becomes the wild field, a vacant name for a vacant land. Cities become Tatar yurts. Developed infrastructure turns into the camps of primitive tribes. Step 3. Change the chronology. Shift events back 700 years. Ensure that the Khanate disappears in the 10th century instead of the 17th. There are no living witnesses left. Everyone who knew the truth has passed away. A new generation learns from new books. Step 4. Change the terms. The empire becomes a nomadic Khanate. Metallurgy turns into a primitive craft. The trading system transforms into raids and plunder. Words change their meaning. History becomes a tale of wild barbarians. Step 5. Create a myth of self-disappearance. The nomads came from nowhere and left for nowhere. They dissolved into history. There's no need to explain who destroyed them. They simply vanished on their own. No violence, no war, a natural process. But the stone doesn't lie. Brick factories do not vanish without a trace. Coins do not cease to exist. Artifacts scream one thing. The Khazar Khaganate was a developed industrial empire. With cities, factories, trade routes, a unified currency, and it was destroyed recently. Skeptics will ask, why such a complicated operation? Why rewrite history, hide artifacts, change names? The answer is simple. It's about gaining control. The Volga route is the oil of the Middle Ages. Whoever controls the Volga controls the trade between the East and the West, between Europe and Asia. Millions in silver flowed through this river every year. Stepan Razin in the year 1670 is traveling from Astrakhan up the Volga River to Penza, Saratov, Saransk. And everywhere the gates are open for him. Not by storm, not by siege. The inhabitants of the cities let his army in themselves, as if he were one of their own. Why? The official history states that it was a rebellion of serfs and peasants. The oppressed masses rose against the landlords. Razin promised them freedom, and they followed him. But look at the geography of the uprising. Razin doesn't head straight for Moscow. He moves along the Volga, capturing cities precisely on the Volga and its tributaries. Astrakhan serves as the base. Tsaritsyn has been taken. Saratov opened its gates. Samara switched to Razin's side. Simbirsk is under siege. Kazan faced an attempt to storm. This is the Volga trade route. The very cities that were once part of the Khanate, the same customs posts where duties were collected, and they opened the gates to the Cossack ataman, not out of fear, but because they recognize him as one of their own. Razin calls himself a Don Cossack, not just a Cossack, specifically a Cossack. In the documents of the 17th century, these words are written differently. Cossack is already an established term for service people. Kozak is an older form, closer to the original Khazar. The difference is just one letter, but behind it lie different roots. Look at Razin's actions. He doesn't just rob, he restores order. In the captured cities, he establishes his governance. He collects taxes. He appoints governors. This is not a bandit who takes what he can. This is a man who builds a state system. In Astrakhan, Razin is carrying out executions. But who is he executing? The Moscow voivodas, the boyars, the appointed officials, those who represent central authority. He does not touch the local population. Moreover, he frees them from the taxes that Moscow collected. He declares that now the taxes will not go to the Tsar, but to local needs. This is not a social uprising. It is a separatist revolt, an attempt to separate the Volga region from Moscow, to restore the independence of the region. And the people of this region support it, because they remember. Not much time has passed since the final conquest. Those who were born in independent cities are still alive. In the year 1671, Razin was captured. He was brought to Moscow. He was executed by quartering in Red Square. This is the standard execution for state criminals, not for a bandit or a rebel, for one who has violated the integrity of the state. After his death, the uprising continues for another year. Astrakhan holds out until 1672. The city is besieged by government troops. They take it by storm. The defenders are dealt with ruthlessly. Mass executions. Entire neighborhoods are burned down. This is not the suppression of a serf rebellion. This is the conquest of an enemy city. The Khazar Khaganate is no exception. It is part of a global process of the 17th century. In those same years, the Commonwealth was defeated. The 30 Years' War is raging in Europe. Siberia is being conquered. The Americas are being colonized. Everywhere it's the same. The erasing of the traces of the previous civilization. The destruction of those who remember a different history. The Khazar Khaganate is a remnant of that world. The last independent region in the territory that was marked with a single word on old maps. It was destroyed in the mid-17th century. A false chronology was created, claiming that the Khaganate perished in the 10th century at the hands of Sviatoslav. They referred to it as a nomadic people, when it was actually an industrial empire. They said it dissolved into history, even though its cities still stand today under new names. But the evidence remains. We walk through their cities. Astrakhan stands on the foundations of Itil. Every time they dig a pit for a new house, they find ancient bricks, with stamps, with dates that are 600 years older than the official founding of the city. These discoveries are recorded in reports, stored away in reserves, not shown to the general public, because it's inconvenient to explain. Penza was officially founded in 1663. However, the local history museum houses artifacts from the 9th and 10th centuries found in the area of the city. Pottery, tools, jewelry. If the city was established in the 17th century, where do those 9th century items come from? Saratov is the same. The official date of its founding is 1594. However, archaeologists are discovering layers that are at least 600 years old. Coins, weapons, remnants of buildings. All of this lies deeper than the official cultural layer. This means the city existed earlier, but this is kept silent. Saransk, Tambov, Voronezh. Dozens of cities along the Volga and its tributaries. They all share one story. Officially founded in the 16th to 17th centuries, but archaeology reveals traces of earlier populations. Moreover, not of individual settlements, but of developed cities with crafts, trade, and fortifications. We keep their trophies in museums. The cap of Monomakh hangs in the armory chamber under a plaque that lies about its origin. Coins with the inscriptions Ardakshir Khazar are found in numismatic collections labeled as Persian silver. Bricks with the stamps of 9th century masters are stored in the reserves of archaeological museums, with dating that does not match the technology of their production. In libraries, maps from the 17th century are stored. They show emptiness between the Don and the Volga, wild fields, uninhabited lands. Yet on these very maps, cities are marked: Astrakhan, Tsaritsyn, Saratov. How can they exist in the wild field? Either the field is not wild, or the cities do not exist. But both are present on the maps. A contradiction that goes unnoticed. They tell us it never happened. The Khazars disappeared 1,000 years ago. They dissolved into history. They left nothing behind except a few fortresses and a handful of coins. A weak nomadic state that crumbled after a single blow from the Kievan prince. 3 paragraphs in a textbook. No significance for the history of Russia. But the numbers tell a different story. Thousands of artifacts, 12 fortresses, a system of trade routes, a mint, metallurgy. This is not a nomadic coalition. This is an empire. Lie. A conscious, methodical, structured lie. They were there. They built factories and smelted metal. They minted their own coins, which circulated from the Baltic to Persia. They controlled the trade routes along which the silver of Eurasia flowed. They created an empire that spanned millions of square kilometers. And they were erased, physically destroyed in the 17th century. The last bastions of resistance were crushed during the time of Stepan Razin. Archives and libraries were burned. Cities were renamed. History was rewritten. Dates were shifted back 700 years so that no one alive could object. New names were invented for their peoples. The Khazars became Cossacks, then Kazakhs. 25 nations of the Khaganate received new names, often Latinized, sometimes Turkified, always distorted. The Burtas became ghosts without descendants. The Savirs dissolved without any records. The Erzya turned into Mordva, a term they never assigned to themselves. Each nation was given a history in which it was always separate, small, and insignificant. The memory that they were once part of an empire was erased from chronicles and legends. They turned a developed civilization into a primitive, nomadic state. Industrial production became simple craftsmanship. The trade system devolved into raids and plundering. Words were distorted in meaning. Facts were warped beyond recognition. But memory in stone does not fade. The brick remembers the hands of the master who stamped his mark on it. The coin holds the name of the ruler who ordered it to be minted. The foundation speaks of the size of the city that stood for 1,000 years and was erased in one generation. The slag from smelting furnaces does not disappear. It lies in the ground and testifies. Metal was smelted here. The customs warehouses do not crumble into dust. Their foundations are discovered with every construction project in Astrakhan. The system of ports does not dissolve into the air. The remnants of the docks are still visible if you know where to look. History is not what is written in textbooks. History is what lies beneath our feet. You just need to pay attention. Ask uncomfortable questions. Count how many bricks are needed for a fortress. Check how far a caravan can travel in a day. Compare the technologies of the 9th and 15th centuries. Numbers don't lie. Logistics doesn't deceive. Technology isn't forged. 1,000,000 bricks for a single fortress means 2 years of continuous work from several kilns. Nomads don't build like that. 80,000 silver coins in the treasures of Scandinavia are traces of large-scale trade, not random losses. 200 ships in one harbor represent the infrastructure of an empire, not just a dock for fishing boats. All these figures add up to one picture, a picture of a state that was much more powerful than we're told. That existed much longer than is written in textbooks. That was destroyed recently. So recently that the trophies are still worn like royal regalia. Truth is always nearby. In museums, there are artifacts that contradict official history, but they have incorrect labels, incorrect dates, incorrect explanations. Stored away are discoveries that are not shown to the public at all. Too inconvenient, too obvious. Excavations reveal things that, according to the official narrative, should not exist. Brick factories among the nomads, metallurgical furnaces among the barbarians, minting workshops among primitive tribes. Each discovery screams, "We have been deceived." But the scream goes unheard, drowned out by academic terminology and scientific explanations. Old maps reveal traces, names that later vanished, cities that officially did not exist, borders of states that are not mentioned in textbooks. 17th century maps depict a world that is radically different from what we are told about the past. Look at Gerard Mercator's map from the year 1614. There, between the Volga and the Don, is marked a territory with cities, rivers, and names of peoples. Yet, in textbooks about this region, it is referred to as the Wild Field, a desert, uninhabited lands before the arrival of Russian settlers. Is the map lying, or is the textbook? The problem is that most people have never seen these maps. They have never held artifacts from museum storerooms in their hands. They have never read reports from archaeological expeditions that are not published in the public domain. They are shown only what aligns with the official version. The rest is hidden away. But the internet has changed the rules of the game. Now you can find old maps in digitized archives. You can read reports from archaeologists that were published 100 years ago, before strict censorship was established. You can compare the accounts of 17th century travelers with what is written in modern textbooks.
and see the contradictions. These contradictions are not accidental. They are not mistakes made by translators or confusion over dates. This is a system, a deliberately constructed system of distorting the past. The goal is to conceal the fact of the destruction of an entire civilization, to portray it as primitive and short-lived, to justify conquest as a civilizational mission. The Khazar Khaganate in official history is portrayed as a nomadic state of barbarians that existed for 200 years and fell apart on its own. A convenient version. No questions, no guilt. They simply disappeared, and in their place arose Rus, a natural course of history. But the reality is different. The Khazar Khanate is the last remnant of a world that existed before the global reshaping. An advanced industrial civilization with factories, trade routes, and a unified currency. It controlled the key arteries of Eurasia. It was an obstacle for those who wanted to establish a new order. They were destroyed in the 17th century, methodically, cruelly. Libraries were burned to erase written memory. Those who remembered the old ways were executed. Cities and peoples were renamed to sever ties with the past. A new history was written, claiming that all this happened 700 years ago, with no living witnesses left. Stepan Razin led the last war of this civilization. He lost. After him, the Volga region was finally conquered. Astrakhan was devastated. The Volga cities are populated by new people who know nothing of the old history. In 2 or 3 generations, the memory is completely erased. Only artifacts remain in the ground. These artifacts are still being discovered. Every year, archaeologists unearth new evidence. However, the classification system is already structured in such a way that any find automatically fits into the official narrative. If a coin is found, it means there was trade with Persia. If bricks are found, it means Byzantine masters were hired. If metal is found, it means purchases were made from the Bulgars. The thought that they produced all of this themselves is never allowed. That they had their own industry, that they were not the periphery of foreign civilizations, but the center of their own. This thought dismantles the entire structure of official history. Therefore, it is not permitted. But we can change this. Everyone who asks questions, everyone who compares facts, everyone who does not take for granted what is written in textbooks. The system relies on silence. It collapses when people begin to speak. Share this information. Highlight the contradictions. Ask uncomfortable questions to tour guides in museums. Why does this brick bear a stamp from the 9th century if the city was founded in the 16th? Why is this coin minted in the name of the Khazars if they were not in this territory? Why is the production technology identical over a distance of 1,000 kilometers? The more people see the contradictions, the harder it will be to ignore them. History is rewritten when a critical mass of doubters emerges, when the old version no longer holds convincing power for the majority. We are on the brink of this moment. The Khazar Khaganate is a key to understanding what happened in the 17th century. Which civilization was destroyed? What world existed before the redivision? If we restore the truth about the Khaganate, the entire structure of lies will collapse. Because if they deceived us here, then they have deceived us in other places as well. The entire history comes into question. The truth is carved in stone.
in bricks stamped with the marks of craftsmen, in coins bearing the names of rulers, in the foundations of cities that are older than their official founding dates. One just needs to learn to read these signs and share them with others. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss new investigations.
There are still many mysteries and discoveries ahead. We will continue to search for clues, ask uncomfortable questions, and explore what official science tends to overlook. Because the truth is always close by. You just need to want to see it.